George Leonardo, former staffer for Senator Cornyn of Texas and founder of Cap Hill Crypto and writer of Cap Hill Crypto Newsletter, which is a newsletter all about crypto policy. And we are joined here today by George, and welcome to How About That Crypto. Thank you so much for joining us, George. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and to do this interview.
Absolutely. So why don't you give the listeners a little background about who you are and what you do before we dive into any of our topics for today.
Awesome. Sure. So yeah, I started Cap Hill Crypto just earlier this year in March, and I started as a way, I was getting more and more interested in crypto. I was looking for kind of new side hustle, a new side project, and just out of curiosity, I started looking up to see what legislation was out there. And I think part of why I was doing that was because, given my background, as you mentioned, when I graduated from Boston College, I went down to Capitol Hill. I worked for Senator Cornyn, first as a staff assistant, kind of just answering phones, earning my bones, so to speak. Then moved up, worked on more policy related stuff, actually like healthcare and education policy. And I was doing that for 3 years when I was ready for a change. Since I was a kid, two things I told myself was I want to be a lawyer and I want to start my own business. So around 2017, it felt like it was a good time. I was ready for a new challenge. So I applied to law school, went to law school, worked at a firm doing bankruptcy litigation for a year. And then last September, I had my second child, a son, and my wife and I, had lived in DC. It was going like 8 years for me, about 10 years for her. And we want to get closer to home. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island. And so we just knew like firm life wasn't going to work out. So I moved back here. So anyways, I was looking for something new to do. I started reading while I was on paternity leave, just found myself reading a lot about crypto. I read the Bitcoin Standard, the Age of Cryptocurrency. So I was looking for how I could, maybe go into that field, and just seemed like a natural fit to focus on the policy and the law, since that's where my background was. So anyways, fast forward to March, I was like digging through, looking for bills that had to do with crypto. I didn't really see any depository or any place to look. I didn't see anyone kind of writing about it at the level that I would be interested in. So I figured, hey, maybe here's an opportunity. So I started in March, just working on building that. Every Friday, we send out a newsletter that talks about what happened on Capitol Hill in terms of new bills, committee hearings, whatever crypto news there might be. Sometimes, whatever the agencies are up to. Just try to keep people educated on what's going on as far as crypto policy goes.
Nice. Awesome. Well, congratulations on the family, and sounds pretty awesome. And congratulations on being able to move home and like pursue your goals. That's also super awesome. With the whole legal world, I've been following that XRP versus the Ripple Labs versus SEC case, and listening to John Deaton, who has the amicus curiae, or whatever you say it, is in trails, and there's got to go to court and fight it out and present your case. And it's not like there's a bunch of precedents. So sounds like it could be an interesting time to be there between the legislation and everything that goes along with it.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to say that, because that's kind of how I came about the idea for Capo Crypto, is because as someone who's just kind of getting into it and trying to get up to speed on it, I was kind of amazed at how I was like, oh, wait, so because when I was on Capitol Hill, I remember talking to, like, there was one or two people who might have, been willing to talk to me about Bitcoin. It wasn't really a thing. And so it was interesting, kind of diving back in a few years later and seeing where we're at. And I was like, wow, we still don't have a legal definition for what's a security and what's a commodity. And just generally, there was a lot of proposed bills, and somebody was impressed with how many more members were interested in it and sponsoring legislation on it. But in others, I was like, wow, we're still really early in navigating this legal field and this policy field. I'm not a finance guy, I'm not a tech guy, but I was like, all right, since we're early in the policy phase of it, maybe I can add some value here. That's kind of when I jumped in Capitol Crypto.
That's awesome. So why don't we jump right in? Why don't you update our users? So on the channel, I talk a lot about how I think that the biggest risk to crypto is legislation being not friendly to it. What are we looking at right now in terms of legislation?
Sure. So I think, the biggest question I hear is that, like, or when you listen to hearings or hear members talk about it, the big thing is like the regulatory clarity, right? And so I think something that's promising that I've noticed is this year, we've seen at least 3 really big bipartisan bills aimed at addressing that big question of, what's a security, what's a commodity. And therefore, what, if it's a commodity, then it'll be subject to CFTC jurisdiction, security, SEC jurisdiction. And so we've seen 3 bipartisan bills, one in the House by leaders of the House Agriculture Committee. On the Hill, it's always important to get buy-in from the committee leaders that have jurisdiction over the bill. So I mean, that's a pretty big deal. There's a similar bill on the Senate side, attempting to provide regulatory clarity, defining digital assets and which are commodities. And then of course there's the Lemus-Gillibrand bill, which was just kind of a massive comprehensive bill, which was also exciting to see just, so many different pieces in one bill. Do I think any of that's going to pass this year? Probably not. It's just too much this year, given the short legislative calendar. So that's kind of like one bucket of bills to keep an eye on, especially as we go into the next Congress. But the other big thing, our big basket, is stablecoins. There seems to be bipartisan support around a few different proposals for stablecoins. Will there be enough momentum to make it a priority to pass this Congress? Again, you hear mixed things. A couple members have been more optimistic. There were some rumors right before August recess that the House Financial Services Committee leaders might have reached a deal. That got pushed back. We said we'll find out in September. So it's, we don't know. It might be, again, too early, something we have to look forward to next year. But again, it's promising signs that we're seeing bipartisan proposals out there. And there's kind of like a handful of bills, tax exemptions for like the small personal cryptocurrency transactions. So you see kind of a variety of bills addressing that, where I think of it as like the coffee cup exemption. You talk about not having to pay taxes on your crypto if you use Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee. And some set the threshold higher than others. I've seen some bills like $50, others $100, up to, I think there's one up to $600. Again, I don't think any of that will pass, but these are kind of just like the high level buckets to look at of different types of bills, and kind of give you a sense of how members are looking at what's a priority in Congress.
Okay, so what I've read is, and correct me if I'm wrong, or tell me what you think about this, that getting something passed because of the elections, is that the reason why we might not see something happen necessarily with this Congress, or maybe until next year? Or is it possible, like after the election, before the changeover in January, that something happens then?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's a couple things. So one of it is just the politics of it, right? Maybe members want to see, will we have, like, think of it. So if you're a Republican, all the news is saying that they think they'll pick up more seats in the House. So it's kind of a little bit of a strategy play, right? Where you wonder, we better off waiting when we have more leverage next year? You just take the deal in front of you. Of course, you don't know what the election is going to be. At the end of the day, aspect of it, where people are trying to figure out, we're better off moving something this year as opposed to next year. But then it's also just a timetable with what's a priority. It takes a while for a bill to get passed. You got to get it through the committee, in the House or Senate, and it's got to go to the floor in that chamber, then go to the other side, go through the same process. And along the way, there's debates, amendments added, and debated. So it's just a process, and it's a very short calendar, because the other thing I'm not sure people realize is, when the House and Senate are in recess for the rest of August, we'll get a decent bit again. And I haven't looked at the calendar in a while, but I know when I was there, like a lot of October, the members are back in the states, just meeting with constituents, whether if they're up for re-election, doing political stuff. So it's kind of the timetable and just the logistics of getting a bill through, but also the political strategy behind it.
Got it. So just to recap real quick, we're looking at a Congress that probably most likely will not really get anything passed this year. One, it sounds like. Two, that we're looking at a couple. We have a comprehensive bill. We have a stablecoin bill, and you said there was another one other than the Gillibrand. You talked about another one before that.
Yes, like in terms of the regulatory clarity, like the big bipartisan ones. There's House agriculture bill and a Senate agriculture bill.
Okay, for clarity of the classification of security versus commodity.
Yeah, and I hate to be negative, because there are rumors that some people will tell you that there's still hope for a stablecoin bill. So I'd like to be optimistic. And then I don't know if you followed. End of last year, there was the investment and infrastructure bill, and included in that bill was this provision that kind of a lot of people say in a way it was helpful, and that it kind of rallied the crypto industry together, because there was kind of a surprise amendment where there was this definition of broker, where was written a little too broadly, might have been rushed through. It seems like no one really agreed with the definition the way it was written after it was passed. So I'm still wondering, it's kind of before I was following it closely, how it passed in the first place. But there's been numerous provisions to try to clarify that. And the main concern was the way it was written. It might include, I think it was intended to include like Coinbase or Robinhood and subject them to certain reporting requirements as a way to kind of avoid tax evasion and raise revenue. I think it scored to raise like 5 million in revenue. So that was one reason why it was included in the infrastructure bill as a way to pay for it. And so there's been a few proposals to try to fix that, try to narrow that definition to make sure it includes just the people it was intended and not people like miners or software developers who might be thrown or might be considered to fall into the definition as it's written now. So to me, when I look at the bills and I see the bipartisan support, I wonder if that one can't kind of sneak its way through. Even the IRS itself, there were reports, they said they don't think they're ready to implement this on January 1st. Next year when it's due. So maybe that adds a little impetus to get things moving to find a fix, because since technically, according to the text of the statute, it's supposed to be implemented January 1st.
All right. So it's we're operating in a lot of areas of uncertainty, and we're looking to get
challenge,
some.
But I guess that's also can be like the exciting part for us, right? It's like following it and trying to stay on top of it the best we can.
Well, it seems that this uncertainty is it's keeping some money out of the market and some keeping some of the adoption low. So it'd be nice to get some sort of clarity. Although there's a lot of people out there that are anti-regulation and anti-legislation,
Yeah.
but not me. I think that's what we need for it to be legitimized in a big way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know about you, but a lot of the people I talk to, even in my family, and they find what I'm doing, you hear things like, "Oh, crypto, that's still the wild, wild west," or they're just kind of scared of it, and I think it's for people on the other side of the law who already
Yeah.
use this stuff and don't see the case. I think to get to like the mainstream adoption that I'd like to see, I think people feel more comfortable if you could say it's regulated. And kind of going back to stable coins, I think that could be kind of an on-ramp for a lot of people. So the fact that that's getting bipartisan support, and there's at least talk that might move, if not this year, then next year, I think that could be a good way to get people in. Some of the more complicated aspects of crypto and DeFi might be hard for a lot of people to grasp, but stable coins, I think, might be a little simpler. It's like a virtual dollar, right?
Right.
I know my parents, they ask me about stable coins more than they do Bitcoin, which can be frustrating sometimes, but
So would you say that, like, for somebody that's listening or watching, that if they're wondering, like, so just like, what's the super high level, do you have confidence that this remains a non-politicized bipartisan issue? Or do you think that there's a risk that the election could go in a direction that creates some sort of hostility towards the crypto regulation legislation?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something I wonder. It's in just the day and age, you see it on all the other issues. They get polarized so quickly. So it's been great. One of the things I would be frustrated with as a Hill staffer, it seemed like anytime an issue came before us, you could kind of guess like, all right, this is how Democrats will view it. This is how Republicans will view it. And so it's kind of nice. One of my favorite parts about covering crypto is that it is bipartisan and seems to kind of dodge a lot of the partisanship that plagues a lot of the other issues. With that said, it's always a threat that politics will have a factor in that. I do think you see a little bit of a narrative developing where it's Republicans are more the protecting innovation in the space, and the crypto skeptics seem to be more on the side of Democrats. But with that said, there's some great members on the left, like Congressman Darren Soto from Florida, Congressman Rishi Torres from New York, who champion blockchain technology as hard as anybody. So I hope it stays bipartisan is my answer. Whether that's the case, remains to be seen.
Just gotta wait, huh? All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I
Well,
guess part of it, is like that's what the education aspects you can look at and trying to just get both sides of the arguments out there. And it's definitely better if you need it to be bipartisan, maybe, that's what I try to tell people. It's not good for anyone when like the tribalism sets in, it'll just set us back. So it's better to try to remain neutral as much as possible.
Totally agree. I do not like seeing it being politicized. Okay, so speaking of some uncertainty, we had just saw that there were these sanctions. The U.S., I guess, with the Department of Treasury, put the sanctions out on Tornado Cash. You want to give us a little Capitol Hill and legal insight to that? Because it seems like that's potentially a mess.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough issue. That's one where it's going to get at what you just brought up, like where it could drive parties one way or the other. You know, it's a tough issue. Because on the one hand, right, it seems the facts are relatively clear. Tornado Cash was being used by some illicit parties for illicit purposes, whether it was North Korea hackers or evading sanctions. I think I saw Chainalysis put together a good report. I shared it in my newsletter last week that had like a pie chart of showing, how the funds broke down. But that said, I think it was like, I want to say 30% at the highest that was used for illicit purposes based on their analysis. So you wonder, one, just from like the political aspect of things and how members of Congress are going to look at that. It's like, how do you balance protecting the privacy rights of, perfectly lawful use and users using this, with the fact that, I mean, it's obviously not going to be popular if you're a member of Congress if someone can run an ad against you saying, oh, you helped support evading sanctions or help North Korea launder money. And so it's a tough issue. I think that's just kind of political issue of it. From a legal standpoint, not a sanctions lawyer by any means, but I have been interested in it. And Coin Center has put together, they're a nonpartisan think tank or looking into blockchain crypto issues. And, they put together a good legal analysis I saw where, there are some questions of just the way legally these sanctions come out, like whether they exceeded their statutory authority, at least with some of the sanctions. So kind of take a step back, the way the sanctions were written, it was Tornado Cash, the website, like the URL was listed, and there was, I want to say like 30 or so Ethereum addresses. And so what Coin Center was saying is, for these just at least these certain addresses where it's just the smart code or smart contract, like we've never seen OFAC sanction code before. So it'll be interesting to see what members of Congress say when they get back and how they approach this issue and see if they take issue with sanctioning code. But Coin Center put together some good analysis where they said, one, it might not be statutory allowable. And then two, there might be some constitutional issues here with code being freedom of speech. And also procedural due process, because when you deprive citizens from the freedom to use this technology without conceivably any process, I think the facts are unclear of what process, if any, was followed in making this decision. But there's at least those issues to think about going forward.
Well, I don't know.
Unpack there.
What's that?
I said, sorry, I know that's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it's a lot. When I first saw this Tornado Cash thing and I saw that it was connected to the North Korean hacker group, Lazarus, I think it is, that was like, oh, well, we definitely don't want to be like arming, helping fund nuclear weapons for North Korea. But then I saw like a bunch of people were pissed about it. So they started sending small amounts of ETH to a bunch of different addresses of like celebrities and other people, which was taking them kind of like causing their address to get like frozen or blacklisted or whatever happens. So that sounds like they could essentially, in theory, couldn't they just send it to a bunch of addresses and basically like jam up the entire ecosystem of Ethereum? I mean, if a bunch of addresses, and if these are big addresses, exchange addresses, I don't know. It just seems like it's like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's interesting. I saw that story too. And my first question too is just from like an enforcement perspective. Like the way I understand it is these sanctions are strict liability. And so like whether you intended to violate sanctions or not, or like receive funds from Tornado Cash, you could still, by the letter of the law, like have violated these sanctions. So, the example you bring up where someone's just spraying Ethereum left and right into random addresses, like obviously I think they'll prioritize this prosecutorial discretion, which ones they're going to go after, but it still just kind of brings up like, I don't think the novelty of the issues we're facing in the legal space of one, like, is this legal? And two, like, if it is, how is this going to be enforced?
Right.
we haven't seen it before. It's unprecedented, as you mentioned.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. So I guess what I also saw is Coin Center. I think they filed a lawsuit. Is that right? Or they're going to court or something like that?
So I don't know if they filed it yet. I think, what I read, the last I've read of it was, they put together the arguments, they posted that, but like it hasn't been filed in a court yet. And I think they're kind of fleshing through the arguments. I'd imagine it'll take some time to really dig into the precedent that is out there with sanctions laws in general, and then see how to apply it to this new case. But that generally takes, I would imagine, like a few months or so, but maybe they're faster than
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, it will be interesting. I'm definitely going to follow that closely to see what arguments they make, one, and two, like how a court would receive those.
Well, Kevin O'Leary on an interview, I don't know if you saw it, he said that Tornado Cash is a crypto cowboy with arrows in its back. He said he's sick of crypto cowboys, and he says that it's fine that it's a sacrificial lamb. He doesn't care about this thing. He wants to get rid of anything that's gonna get the nose turned up by regulators, and he thinks that the guy that got arrested at Holland or somewhere, that's okay that that dude is arrested, because it's just one sacrifice for the greater good and movement of crypto. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm a big Kevin O'Leary fan. I get that argument. I've seen that argument. I kind of get like the political aspect of it, where I get that, where maybe, like, if I'm understanding him correctly, the argument is, all right, well, if we clean up some of that bad stuff, and like what we talked about earlier with the Wild West of crypto, that narrative kind of goes away. It's like, oh, see, we can police this. My problem with that argument is that that's usually not how we look at the law, right? Like, because bad people are using it, no one can use it, right?
Right.
And I do wonder about it's just kind of interesting, because the burden seems to be on the people who want to use or have financial privacy, right? It's like you need an excuse to say why you want your transaction to be private, rather than the burden of being like, why shouldn't we be able to be private? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when I look at it from that perspective, and I see, it's only 30% are using it, and the slippery slope argument, where, all right, so sanction, this is code at the end of the day. Like, what kind of precedent are we setting when we say it's okay to just basically ban pieces of software? I'm kind of just thinking about these issues with the Tornado Cash. So it's, this is my opinion on it. I don't know, I guess I divide it into two ways: the ways Congress will think about it, and then, my own political philosophies of wanting to protect financial privacy.
Totally. Yeah, I like the way you put it. Yes, from an angle of, let's clean this up and make this legit and get rid of this stuff that's looks super illegitimate, like something to launder money, and get rid of that. But yeah, the legal side, it seems like there's a big conversation that's going to be had, or a big fight that might be had, and that sounds like kind of exciting, because it also is legitimizing the space in a way by just having it so public. And these lawsuits and judges and lawyers and all the regulators, they have to get in and they have to present their argument. So more headlines to come.
I do feel like more people have talked to me about Tornado Cash than a lot of maybe your average week on Capitol Hill, which is a bill or a hearing that goes on. Tornado Cash really seems to touch on I don't know, it seems to bring out people feel passionate about it one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll get people thinking about these issues, and at some point the industry is going to have to confront it. So better start now, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us this update. Is there any last piece of information that you think that people should have in terms of these topics?
Only thing I guess might be a good note to close on is, having worked on the Hill as a staff assistant, taking calls, and as a legislative correspondent, where I'd read all the mail that came in. It does matter, if people feel passionate about crypto issues, however they feel about them, it does help to weigh in. If you ever, happen to be in DC, check in with your members. I think the more people or members start hearing about it, and how people feel about it, maybe, it does move the needle. It will take time. But unless members feel like this is a priority for the constituents, it's going to be hard for them to just decide to make it a priority on their own. And we've seen a lot of progress, but there's a long way to go. So, when you call in, you write in, it does get logged, it does get passed along to the senators or member of Congress. So, it doesn't hurt. And then obviously elections coming up. Crypto Curator, I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he does a great job tracking candidates. And so if you're more curious about the political side of thing and how candidates view crypto, it's a good website or good person to follow, website to check out to figure out how it can make a difference in November.
Awesome. Cool. So you heard it here. Get involved, reach out to your congressional members, let them know what's up. Also, if you're not already subscribed to George's newsletter for Cap Hill Crypto, there's going to be a link in the description below. You can also find him on Cap Hill Crypto on Twitter, right? Is that?
Yep, handles Cap Hill Crypto, caphillcrypto.com if you want to go sign up for the newsletter. Try to keep it nice and simple.
All right, cool. caphillcrypto.com. The link will be in the description. Thanks again for coming on. I'd love to touch base with you once we get some more updates and just keep everybody updated on what's happening Capitol Hill.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. This was fun, and congrats to you on your success, and looking forward to watching you continue to build what you're working on. And yeah, we'd love to come back on sometime. Thank you.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Take care. And if you're listening on YouTube podcast, please give us a following and a rating. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a subscribe, leave a comment below. It helps support the channel, and we'll see you all next time. All right. See ya. Hodl on.